Hi friends, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today I'm super excited to share Cirque's latest collab with Jarritos. So Jarritos, if you don't know, is a Mexican soda brand. You probably have seen a lineup of them in the supermarket where they're just so colorful. There's all these fruity flavors, I think 12 in total. And obviously this collection is inspired by those flavors. So this is a 6-piece collection that features 5 jelly polishes that have a squishy, translucent finish and 1 glitter topper. As always, I do have my usual swatches for these and comparisons, but I do also try some recreation attempts using some of Cirque's previous jellies. So if you're excited to see how I did with those, just stay tuned. So first up, I have to include the additional PR that we got with this collection. I had never received soda through PR before, so it was just so cool to see. They sent us 4 of the Jarritos flavors: mandarin, pineapple, guava, and grapefruit. But I think the most exciting thing for me was seeing how the polishes came. I was just so obsessed with this little 6-pack container. But here is a closer look at the actual boxes that the polishes come in. They are just so beautifully designed, so colorful and fun, with the Jarritos logo right in the front, and even on the inside there's the repeating bottle pattern and the super good kind of tagline as well. And then for the actual polishes, the added detail is a little Jarritos sticker right on the cap. Now getting into the polishes, the first one that we have is Guayaba Jelly, and this one is a guava pink nail polish, obviously inspired by the guava flavor. And I was so excited to finally see a warmer toned medium pink jelly from Cirque. If you're familiar with their catalog, you know that they love to release cool toned pinks, and I definitely love those too, but this was just missing in their lineup, and it is so beautiful. Like most of their other jellies, this one had a fantastic formula that was very even coverage, so you could wear this in 1, 2, or 3 coats depending on your preference. I personally like this one built up in 3 coats just because it builds that color up. It is just so beautiful. I'm honestly not even a fan of guava as a fruit, but you know I love the color. This is definitely my top favorite from the collection. Next up we have Piña Jelly, and this one is described as a sunshine yellow jelly. I would say that's definitely very accurate. It's almost like a bright primary shade of yellow, which I think is so beautiful. And I was really impressed with the formula on this one. On the first coat alone, as you can see, it is just so incredibly even. I was expecting for a lighter shade like this to just be a little bit more on the streaky side or even just more on the sheer side, but there's a surprising level of pigmentation to this one while still obviously being a very juicy, translucent jelly finish. So this is definitely another one that I think you could wear in 1, 2, or 3 coats depending on your preference. I personally like this one in 3 as well. Up next we have Jarritos Jelly, and this one is a coral leaning orange jelly. Unfortunately, I feel like this one is just picking up as a straight sort of orange color. You kind of don't really see the coral color, at least on camera. Obviously I can see it in real life, so just imagine that there's even more warmth or like a pinky leaning color to this. So apologies I couldn't get it color accurate, but either way, this one is still another super gorgeous shade. I don't always love warmer oranges like this, but this one just really hit the spot for me. And just like the others so far, we had another super flawless formula that was very even coverage, so again, it looks good no matter how many coats you do. Next we have Mxcn Cola Jelly, and this is a slightly brown-leaning oxblood jelly polish. And I would say that's definitely a very accurate color description. It's definitely a very dark red with a bit of a brown undertone, and I absolutely love the color. It is just so dark and vampy, especially with fall right around the corner. This one did have another really great formula that was so smooth to apply. It self-levels really nicely. jelly. It's very even coverage, especially with the wide paddle brushes, but something that I've noticed with a lot of Cirque's darker kind of jellies is that they tend to be a lot more sheer, almost less pigmented. So for a lot of them, this one included, even if you do 3 coats, you are going to see straight through to your nail line, so it gives it a very glassy, translucent effect. I personally don't mind that, but if you don't like seeing visible nail line, you might want to use a blurring base coat for this one. And the last jelly in the collection is Toronja Jelly, and this one is an emerald green jelly. This one is obviously inspired by the grapefruit bottle being that emerald green color, and as you might expect, similar to the last shade, since this one looks darker in the bottle, it is surprisingly very sheer on the nail, but just like the others in the collection, it had a really smooth formula that applied very evenly and it self-leveled nicely. I personally would wear these built up in 3 coats just to give a little bit more coverage, but just like with the last shade, I would say that this one is another super glassy, translucent, stained glass kind of jelly, so no matter how many coats you do, the color might deepen, but it's not going to cover up your nail line at all. That being said, it is another beautiful jelly. I love the emerald color. And rounding out the collection, we have Azúcar, and this is a micro iridescent rainbow glitter topper. This one is just so pretty, so dainty. It's not holographic, but as you can see, because of the iridescent glitter mix, it does still have this kind of color changing quality to it, and it just has this really pretty twinkle, especially worn on its own. But of course, I'm also going to be showing this over white and black, which I think looks great either way, but iridescent glitter is always just gonna pop more against a darker base, and I feel like it looks like sugar crystals. And of course, I am gonna be showing these topped over the jellies in the collection on the left side and layered in between the jelly polishes on the right side, so kind of doing a glitter sandwich where you can see the sparkle is a little bit more subdued, but it's still very twinkly. They really picked the perfect name for this topper because it really does look like little sugar crystals. I am just so obsessed with how this topper pairs with the rest of the collection. But with the darker shades, I would recommend doing 2 coats as a base if you are going to be doing a glitter sandwich, because as seen here, just doing the 1 coat I feel like looks pretty sheer. More so for Mxcn Cola. I think with Toronja it's a little bit more pigmented, but I should have gone for an extra coat. And here I'm wearing the collection or the jellies in 2 coats each on my right hand where I have shorter nails, just so you can get an idea of the coverage. I think it's definitely passable on 2 coats. You get that decent amount of color and that squishy jelly finish, but I still prefer just doing a 3rd coat for these just to really build them up. They just get a little bit more saturated, but again, they're not really covering up your nail line. I guess if anything, I would maybe say that Jarritos looks like it blurs the nail line the most, but I still wouldn't call it like a milky jelly by any means. Again, I just can't stress enough that when it comes to jelly polishes, do not expect to get them fully opaque because you are going to be doing like 20 coats per nail. But anyway, here is the collection topped with Azúcar here in direct sunlight, just so you can see that twinkle. I think it is just so pretty. It obviously catches the light really beautifully in the sun, but iridescent glitters actually shine in low light too. There's just something about the lighting that makes them like glow and pop against the bases. So yeah, definitely a great topper for this collection. Now getting into comparisons, we're starting with Guayaba Jelly, and like I mentioned, Cirque doesn't really have another warm pink in their collection. The closest, I guess, would be Hearth Jelly, but that's a little bit more on the terracotta side. So instead, I thought to try to recreate Guayaba Jelly with a couple of other pinks that they have, starting with Peach Jelly, which is the only other kind of lighter, warm-toned pink in their collection. That's obviously too light to use on its own, so I thought to layer it instead over XOXO Jelly, which is their warmer hot pink jelly. It's almost a little bit red leaning, but still very much a hot pink. So you can see here I did 1 coat of each, and it's just a little too dark. You see a little too much of that hot pink coming through from XOXO. So once I did a 2nd coat of Peach Jelly, I feel like the color is just so close. Maybe not an exact dupe, but if you do happen to have Peach and XOXO, I really think you could just recreate Guayaba. And obviously, I also had to compare Guayaba to ILNP's Pink Slush from their watercolor collection, which was their debut for their jelly formula. And I was so excited for that shade because it was the warm toned pink that I was just waiting for. You're gonna see these in 1, 2, and 3 coats, so you can just see the differences for yourself. To be very nitpicky, I would not call these one-to-one dupes, but they are very, very similar, where I don't think you need both. If you do already happen to have Pink Slush in your collection, you can skip on Guayaba. They basically have the same formula. Pink Slush is just a little bit warmer and maybe darker, but if you're choosing between the two, I might just go with ILNP because it's more affordable. Speaking of polishes that are very, very similar, we of course are going to be comparing Piña Jelly to Mango Jelly from the Glazed collection earlier this year. These two are incredibly similar. Again, I would not say that they are one-to-one dupes. I mean, unless you're doing one coat as seen here, because that's where they are going to look the most similar. But the more coats that you do, the more you're going to be able to see the difference between them. Where I would say Piña is like a very true primary yellow shade. Mango has a little bit more warmth to it, like it has a slight orange kind of leaning color, very much like an actual mango. And you can see it's just a little bit darker too. It's going to be the most obvious on 3 coats. Then for Jarritos Jelly, I wanted to quickly show this next to Fuyū Jelly from the Mxn collab last year. I would say that these are the most similar in terms of being like warm, corally oranges, but obviously they are definitely very different. So to try to recreate Jarritos Jelly, I wanted to use Saffron Jelly, which is more of a true like lighter tangerine orange shade, very yellow leaning. So to get more of that warmth, I thought to layer it over Poppy Jelly, which isn't really a true red. It's like a very orange leaning red, I would say. So I thought that it had the same amount of warmth, especially to serve as the base for Saffron Jelly. So here again, I have 1 coat of each, and I feel like this is definitely a very, very close recreation. Again, maybe not a dead-on dupe because I think mine is a little too warm. I did also want to show this next to ILNP's Tango from that same watercolor collection I mentioned before. This one is like a true mid-toned orange shade where it's not coral leaning by any means. So I thought to maybe try to recreate it, I could do 1 coat of Tango over 1 coat of Malibu, which is ILNP's Hot Pink Jelly, but as you can see, it's a little too warm and a little too dark. Then for Mxcn Cola, Cirque doesn't really have another super dark oxblood red. The closest to a brown leaning red shade is Marsala Jelly, but as you can see, this is just way too muted. So again, to try and recreate Mxcn Cola, I wanted to use a slightly warm brown base using Cocoa Jelly. And first, I thought to layer Bitten Jelly on top of that. It's another deep, vampy kind of shade, as you can see in the bottle, but it applies more like a berry leaning color, so it's not as red, which I feel like you can see very clearly here. My recreation attempt is just a little too berry leaning, but then I thought I could use Lucky Jelly, which is more of Cirque's true primary red shade. Obviously it's a little too light on its own, but layered over Cocoa Jelly I feel like was pretty close. Granted, I'm only wearing 2 coats of Mxcn Cola here. Then for Toronja Jelly, I of course have to show this next to Kelly Jelly, which is kind of like a true mid-tone grassy green. I feel like it looks a little bit more yellow leaning though, or Toronja has a little bit more blue. So to get a little bit more of that teal kind of undertone, I thought to maybe layer Kelly over Verdigris Jelly, which is like a pretty true teal kind of color, but it is very blue leaning. So I was hoping that Kelly would be able to sort of balance it out. I'm only doing 1 coat of each here, and I feel like it's just not quite the right shade, so I had a much harder time trying to recreate this one. And lastly, for Azúcar, the closest that I had in my collection to a dupe was ILNP's Ball Drop, which was from one of their New Year's Eve collections. It's the only other kind of iridescent micro glitter that I have, and as you can see, they are definitely very different, even though they are like the same on paper. It looks like Ball Drop has this kind of ivory color, but it doesn't really show up, especially if you're just doing 1 coat. But the main difference is in the color shifts in their iridescent iridescent glitters. It's kind of hard to describe because they both are colorful and rainbowy in their own ways, but I would almost say that Ball Drop just has like a more vibrant kind of color, while Azúcar is a little bit maybe pastel. But I have to give a huge shout out to my bestie coming through with this comparison, because as you can see, these are basically dead on dupes. This is one coat of Azúcar compared to one coat of Mila's first birthday, and when it comes to their little iridescent glitters, they are basically the same color, the same size. She did want to mention though that her bottle of Mila is a little bit older, so it was just a little bit more thick and therefore applied a bit more dense, but if she used some thinner, it would have been the exact same as Azúcar. The plus side here is that Mila is a little bit cheaper. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons for Cirque's new Jarritos collection. As always, I would love to know your thoughts on this release because, no surprise, I'm a big fan of them. Obviously, I'm just already a big fan of Cirque's jelly finish, and I also really love Jarritos, so I think this collab is just so cute. The packaging is just so beautiful and fun, and I also still can't get over the fact that I received soda in PR, so it was just such a fun unboxing experience. I obviously don't really have any complaints about these because they just perform really well. They are pretty much the same as Cirque's other jellies, but I do have a couple of gripes regarding the colors. Now, initially when I did get the email about this collab, I was excited at first, but then I immediately thought, ooh, if this is gonna be like a jelly collection, they are gonna be so limited with their colors because they pretty much already have a matching jelly polish to whatever flavor, maybe with the exception of tamarind, but I guess I could see that one being a little bit of like a prugly shade, so they would go with, you know, a more popular color. But it does kind of suck to see that they released a yellow that is like so similar to mango jelly, which only released earlier this year. I think the more annoying thing for me personally is that Cirque obviously has a couple of color gaps in their jelly catalog, and it's just frustrating that they finally introduce polishes to fill those gaps, but they're limited edition. They're not going to be permanent. It's honestly pretty crazy to me how long it's taken Cirque to release this warm mid-toned pink shade, because they just release so many cool toned ones. I feel like I probably mentioned it in the glazed video a few months ago that while Pink Lady Jelly is so pretty, I really wish that it was like a warmer pink instead. And even with Mxcn Cola, we don't have another super deep like oxblood vampy red kind of jelly, so it just sucks to see these shades that, you know, we've been missing from their lineup come out in a limited edition collab. But as you saw with my comparisons and recreations portion, I was able to more or less recreate Mxcn Cola jelly with permanent Cirque shades already, and with Guayaba Jelly you can just get a dupe for it basically. And I wouldn't be surprised if down the line Cirque will end up putting out polishes that are very similar to these two but in their permanent catalog. So for what it's worth, I definitely think these are super cute, especially if you don't have any of Cirque's jellies. If you're a big fan of Jarritos, I obviously can't recommend them enough because it's just such a cute collab and they really nailed it. But if you do already have some of the other jellies that I shared, you could more or less recreate the majority of these or just find more affordable dupes by other brands, because especially with these being collab polishes, they're actually going to be retailing for $14.50 compared to their usual jelly price, which is $12.50. If you do love these though and you do plan on shopping them, I would greatly appreciate if you shop them through my affiliate link, which is in the description box. It really means so much when you guys shop through that and help support me and my channel. As always, a big thank you for your support. But either way, I hope that you like the video, and of course leave me any and all thoughts that you have down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.